From Conor McGregor going from hero to zero to everyone wondering whether he'll ever be able to reach the same heights he once did, let's talk about how Mystic Mac is his own worst enemy. Even though the later years of his career haven't been so glamorous, Conor's rise to the top was a thing of beauty. After losing for the second time in his sixth professional MMA fight back in 2010, McGregor realized that he needed to lock in and get serious, which is exactly what he did. He won his next 5 fights via KO or TKO and soon became the hottest fighter of Cage Warriors, eventually achieving double champ status in December of 2012. Dana White and the UFC took note of the Irish sensation, so they signed him as soon as they could. And almost immediately, Conor became a star. He destroyed Marcus Brimage in his UFC debut before defeating Max Holloway on points. Soon after, he fought Diego Brandao and Dustin Poirier, who both got TKO'd by Mystic Mac. Following those 4 fights, he took on Dennis Siver in January of 2015, and once again, the Irishman destroyed his opponent like it was nothing. He looked like $1 million in each of his UFC fights thus far, but this was only the beginning for him as he soon became one of the most popular athletes in the world. Besides being an amazing fighter, Conor had amazing skills on the mic, making him one of the most entertaining personalities in all of sports. And the best part was that he could always back up his trash talk with terrific performances. After the fight against Dennis, it was clear that McGregor deserved a shot at Jose Aldo's title. But since the Brazilian suffered an injury, he pulled out of their bout at UFC 189. Instead, Conor faced off against Chad Mendes for the interim featherweight title. And even though Mendes put up a great fight, it was Conor who won through TKO once again. But this was only a sign of things to come, as he soon became a megastar. The build-up to his fight against Aldo at UFC 194 showed us all how much of a menace Conor is. He knew Jose was a tough opponent, so he made sure to get in his head by talking a ton of trash and being as disrespectful as possible. He was such an entertaining character that not only was he bringing more eyes to himself, but he made MMA and the UFC 10 times more popular than they ever were. And once McGregor finally went up against Aldo, he KO'd him in 13 seconds, allowing him to capture the 145-pound title in historic fashion. Nobody could believe what they saw as Aldo was unbeaten for years, yet Mystic Mac made such light work of him, so as you can imagine, his star power increased even more. He was the face of the UFC and everyone wanted to be like Conor. By the time it was 2016, Conor had his eyes on becoming a 2-weight world champion in the UFC. But things took a turn for the worse when he lost against Nate Diaz at the UFC 196. Luckily for him though, he bounced back and defeated Diaz at UFC 202, before going on to destroy Eddie Alvarez at 205 and becoming the first double champ in UFC history. Ever since then though, things haven't been the same. By this point, McGregor had become such a massive name and earned so much money that he stopped caring about fighting and lost the hunger he used to have. Instead, all he cared about was getting more clout and money, so he chose to move away from the UFC and fight Floyd Mayweather for a massive payday. Once that saga was over, he was finally in talks to face off against Khabib, but that rivalry made Conor look like a terrible person. I mean, who can forget about the bus incident from April of 2018? After the UFC 223 Media Day event came to an end, Conor made his way to Barclays Center to attack Khabib, so he threw a steel chair right at the bus Khabib and others were sitting in. While Khabib was fine, others were injured, so Conor was taken to court for his actions. On top of that, during the build-up to their fight, the Notorious One disrespected Khabib and his religion to the point that many people were incredibly disappointed in him. Then, once they finally met at UFC 229, the Eagle made McGregor look like a fool when he made him tap. Many argued that if Conor stayed focused on MMA, rather than going off to fight Mayweather, then he could have actually won. What's more, McGregor's career has been on a downward spiral ever since the Khabib loss, as he only won against a washed-up cowboy while losing both of his fights in 2021 to Dustin. Conor still hasn't returned to action, but based on how terrible he's looked ever since the Khabib fight, many think he shouldn't come back to the octagon, especially because he keeps finding himself in trouble. I mean, the dude's been a walking controversy for years at this point. Besides the bus incident, he's been found guilty of numerous speeding offenses throughout the years, which shows us how he thinks he can do whatever he wants. But that's still not as bad as the number of assault allegations Conor's faced. In early 2019, reports emerged that claimed that McGregor was under investigation by Irish law enforcement for allegedly assaulting a woman in a Dublin hotel. Then, in October of that same year, the police got a complaint from another woman that he assaulted her in a car outside a Dublin pub. Once in 2019, a fan tried to take a picture of him in Miami Beach, but he got pissed and smashed the fan's phone. Following that, he was in the news once again in August of 2019 when he punched a pub customer who refused to try a shot of McGregor's Proper 12 whiskey. Then, in October of 2021, an Italian DJ claimed that Conor randomly attacked him while they were partying. But it doesn't end here, because in September of 2020, Mystic Mac was detained and questioned by authorities for alleged indecent exposure and assault at a bar. Then, in 2023, another woman accused the athlete of assault again. Besides this, Conor's also known for being aggressive with people or even attacking them. So Conor went from being the most popular OP fighter who was loved by almost everyone to being a loser who ran his mouth and rarely won while being problematic everywhere he went. When you couple all of this with the fact that he doesn't care about his health, then it's hard to disagree with the fact that he's his own worst enemy. Based on his appearance, it's obvious that he's been roided up like crazy for a while now. On top of that, all he does is drink whiskey and get high on coke. When you take all three of those things at the same time, you are running the risk of bad health and performance as an athlete. Sure, Conor said he's going to come back to fight Chandler, but let's be real. He's going to look like an absolute fool out there because he has no discipline anymore. After all, when your work ethic and the overall health of your body aren't the best, there's no point in competing professionally anymore. But McGregor doesn't think rationally, and that's not surprising since all he cares about is fame and money. He's not a good fighter anymore, and everyone knows that. Yet for the longest time, all he's done is talk about how he's gonna beat some of the best dudes in the UFC. As if all the controversies he's found himself in aren't bad enough, Conor earned himself more haters by constantly talking down on fighters for no reason. Heck, he called out Alexander Volkanovski, claiming that he'd be quick work as he's readable, hittable, and hurtable. What's more, he even called out the highlight, saying that he'd slap him around. Conor even claimed that he wanted to fight the BMF champ for his title, but as usual, it was just all bark and no bite from the notorious one. McGregor keeps looking for an excuse to make everything about himself, so he keeps talking down to trending fighters. But all this does is make people hate him more. Fans think Conor's a delusional clown who just likes to run his mouth and do nothing else. But still, many of us wonder whether he'll be able to snap out of it and reach the same heights he previously had. What do you guys think? Because I definitely don't have faith in him anymore. The dude's been a train wreck for years, and based on his actions since 2021, things have only been getting worse rather than better. Sure, he has a chance to redeem himself by putting on a show against Chandler and KOing him, but the chances of that happening are pretty slim. A loss seems more likely for Conor, and if that does actually happen, then he needs to retire from the sport and learn to shut his mouth. Or people will forget about all that he achieved and start to think he is just a douchebag who barely had any redeeming qualities. So, from everyone wondering whether he'll ever be able to reach the same heights he once did, to McGregor going from hero to zero, that was why Mystic Mac is his own worst enemy.